1.
Hello and welcome to RBCM at Home. My name is Kim Goff and I'm a learning program developer at the Royal BC Museum. I'm coming to you today from my home, which is located on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. Killer whales are an important part of the Lekwungen origin story, and Quoqualamchun is a Lekwungen name for killer whale. I encourage you all to consider the traditional territory on where you are and whose land you're on today, wherever that is. And also, I'd ask you to honor the 215 children who died at the Kamloops Indian Residential School. And for non-Indigenous people who are still grappling with these truths, please read the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report, in particular the chapter on missing children and unmarked burials. Oh, pardon me, I'll stop that there. So welcome everyone. RBCM at Home is a series that started a year ago when our museum and archive was closed due to the pandemic. It was an opportunity to talk to staff about what they were working on from home. And when we reopened, we continued this program as a way of staying connected with people at home or at school around the province. This program and previous ones have been recorded, and you can find them on the Royal BC Museum's YouTube channel. June is Orca Awareness Month. And although it originated in Washington State, and we share the Salish Sea orca population with Washington and Oregon. And so BC now also recognizes this month. Since we do share those waters, today's guest is my first international guest. Joining us from Friday Harbour in Washington State is Jenny Atkinson. Jenny is the executive director of the Whale Museum, which was founded to study southern resident orcas and to share the results with the public. In addition, they also advocate for their protection, have a whale hotline, and the Soundwatch Boater Education Program. Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you so much, Kim. It's a real pleasure to be with you. I really wish I could be at the RCBM today. I know you have a new exhibit that I'm super eager to see, but instead we're going to talk a little bit online. And if you'd like, I can share a presentation that is about the orcas you might see in the Salish Sea.
Great, let's jump right in.
So tell me if that looks all right.
I see that. It's a little, yeah, I can see that well. Thank
you. Great. So I am speaking to you from San Juan Island, which is the middle of the traditional fishing territories for the Lummi Nation that also would be the territory for the Swinomish and Samish and many other tribal members that fish in this region. The Salish Sea was named to honor the Salish First Nations tribes and First Nations groups that live here. Salish means people of the fish. So they are folks that are reliant on salmon populations. And this name first gained approval by the elders before it went to the naming boards of Canada and the United States. So it is the official name that includes the traditional names of more like Georgia Strait, Strait of Juan de Fuca, Rosario, Haro Strait, and Puget Sound. Because it's this connected ecosystem, we needed to come up with a connecting name so that we would manage this and look at this in a holistic way. Two federal agencies and governments, United States and Canada, are managing this. Lots of individual, state, city, municipal. So we needed to find a way to think of this holistically. So we have two ecotypes that you will find of killer whales that you find in this region. A lot of folks want to know why we call them killer whales and not orcas, which sounds so much more friendly until you realize that Orcinus orca means demon of the deep. So when you are a critter that can be, sorry, this is going to be in US measurements rather than in metric, but up to 30 feet long, and you have very sharp pointy teeth, and you can weigh up to 16,000 pounds. Maybe we don't want to think of this as a soft, gentle, fuzzy creature. This is an animal that is awesome and deserves our respect and awareness of their needs to survive. They can live up to 100 years or longer. Males typically, their average lifespan would be 50 to 60, although there are some population pressures that are causing us to lose males sooner. The picture that you see below is of an adult male killer whale to the right and its juvenile younger sibling to the left. So you can see a marked difference between the dorsal fins and the sizes. But it's important to note in the orca community, fathers don't play the same role that they would in a traditional human society. Instead, they would continue on as big brothers and stay with their family groups in that capacity rather than as the dad. For residents, particularly matriarchs, the moms are in charge. So here are some other shots to look at differences in dorsal fins. The adult female's fin can get up to be about 3 feet high. The males will get up to about 6 feet high. When they hit their teenage years, that's when that fin is really going to start to grow, and they are nicknamed sprouters. So it's going to go from the size of a baby's fin. Over here in the yellow circle, you see the little rostrum poking up next to mom and a sibling. It's going to go from about 10 to 12 inches high to 6 feet in the span of about 10 years. They're charismatic megafauna. They are an icon of the Pacific Northwest and the Salish Sea. So on any given encounter, you might see behaviors like a spy hop, porpoising, or fast travel. You might see a tail fluke stick up and wave or slap. You might see a full-bodied breach. And I'll just point out that this female here was in her mid-70s when she did this breach. So they are always active and dynamic. This is a peck fin coming up in the bull kelp. It's one of their favorite behaviors as residents. They like to get into the bull kelp and wear it around, so to speak. And this is an orca surfacing to take a breath. They're mammals like us, so they have to breathe air. So what you're seeing here is the air bursting through the water, creating this blow. So it's a very widespread mammal. You'll find them in every ocean on the planet. That's what's signaled by the dark blue here. More than 50,000 found in the oceans throughout the world. And we have 3 ecotypes in this region. There are 2 that spend a lot of time in the inland waters. The third we don't see very often, but I will mention them in just a moment. This is another look at the ecotypes and forms. This chart done by the American Cetacean Society and Uko Gorder gives us a better look at how they all look pretty similar. They, have this striking dark and light area with a saddle patch and this triangle off the back that's known as the dorsal fin. But when you start to look closer, you might see that the shading is a little bit difference in appearances and size, as well as shapes of dorsal fins. But in this area, these are the 2 we see the most. On the top here are the resident killer whales, and then big killer whales, also known as transients. And we'll talk about those more today because they're the 2 that you're most likely going to see in the inland waters. So diving in a little deeper, transients were nicknamed that at the beginning because we thought they were visitors to the region and that they were rarely ever here until about a decade ago. And they really started to grow in numbers. Instead of seeing small groups of 3 to 4 hunters, we would see sometimes 12 to 25 coming in larger groups. But they tend to be in smaller groups because they are focused on finding marine mammals, and they need to move quickly and they need to move stealthily because their prey also used sound. So they're very quiet when they're hunting. They are not necessarily related, although a lot of times you will find moms and their kids hanging around, but it's not like the southern residents, which we'll talk about in a moment. So they're not necessarily related. The males may go off and form a boys club and travel around as bachelors, so to speak. When we have seen their skeletons, we've noticed a morphological adaptation in their jaws. Their jaws and teeth are much more robust, designed to crunch through a weightier, bonier animal like a harbor seal, whereas fish eaters don't need that strength in their jaw. Their numbers are increasing. They have plenty of prey. They're able to handle the toxin load in their bodies better because of that. So their estimated number in the Pacific Northwest, which ranges from California all the way up into the Southeast Alaska, is around 400. Residents, we have 2 populations in this region. At the northern end of Vancouver Island, you would find the northern residents. There's more than 300 in that group. The southern residents are the ones that we know are most familiar with in this region. There's 75 members in this endangered population, and there are recovery plans to help them because they are severely threatened for extinction. So we're really concerned about that population. But they do stay in these larger pods or family groups that often consist of several generations, typically led by the elder female. The southern resident community is organized as an acoustic clan known as J clan. There are 3 pods within that, J, K, and L pod. Both the northern and southern resident communities are fish eaters, and they all prefer Chinook. That is the biggest bang for the buck. Because they are searching after prey that are not reliant on sound, they are very vocal most of the time, and you can hear them on the hydrophone. The third type that we won't talk about much today is called the offshore. They're also fish eaters, but their preferred prey seems to be sharks, and they're rarely seen in the inland waters. They tend to stay out off the continental shelf, foraging in much deeper waters. So here's a closer look at some of the differences when you see transients and southern residents. You have differences in that dorsal fin, which is the part that we're going to see most of the time that's above the water when they surface. 95% of a whale's life is spent below the surface, so kind of need that fin to poke up to get a look. But you can use these to individually identify that animal, particularly with the combination of looking at the saddle patch. In general, transient fins are known to be more like a triangle shape with a pointier top, and the residents with a rounder top. In the saddle patches and residents, we'll look at these more closely, but you have a variety of shapes. Transients tend to have this solid grayish white color, a closed saddle. Transient fins also tend to be a little gnarlier. They're a little rougher in the way they hunt, so they might have more nicks and notches and scrapes on their bodies than a southern resident, although southern residents also have scars. So here are some saddle patch types that you would find in the southern resident community. We have the closed saddle with a finger, so it has what looks like a thumb or a finger poking up off of it. You have a solid saddle patch, and you have an open or a check. It's important to note that these can be very different on the other side of the animal. So the ID catalogs all have a left and a right side. And the saddle patches are as unique to that animal as our fingerprints are to us. So this combination can easily be used as a visual identification technique to individually identify each one of these animals when they pass by. This is a look at a chart from the Center for Whale Research's ID guide. This was a technique pioneered by the Canadian researcher Michael Bigg. And by using the shape of that dorsal fin and saddle patch, we can individually identify these animals. They also get the scars, nicks, and notches that I mentioned before. Those are going to heal over, but we can still use those as ways to identify these animals. So that's what the red triangles are pointing out. In the top left corner, you see a letter and a number. That's known as the alphanumeric, the scientific designation for each animal. So the letter indicates the pod, the number indicates the order in which they were seen. It's a little different for transients. They all start with T, and then there's the number for the order they were seen, and then offspring of that animal, there's a lettering and numbering system that goes after that. So it might be T02A2 rather than J2, J3, J4. So it's a little bit different system, and definitely learned separately. So their range, as I mentioned, is quite extensive, more so for the transients. This is the southern resident range. It overlaps with the transient range, although we never have seen transients residents and mix and mingle, so to speak. They might share the same area, but they do not recruit in from other populations. They're going to only breed within their community. Let's listen just quickly so you can hear some differences, because while we call them different languages, we don't exactly know what language means to an animal, but you can hear the difference. This is a northern resident call. Sorry. And that's G-Clan, they're nicknamed the Donkeys. This is the most often heard call for the southern residents. That's J-Pod's signature call. And transients sound a little bit different. Some think they sound a little spooky. So if you hear them on the hydrophone and you've been studying their calls, you're able to detect the difference and know who you're listening to. So you can listen live at our hydrophone there at Limekiln Point State Park, which, that address is csound.org. And this season, we also installed a webcam. So listen and watch, and you never know what might pass by. So talking a little bit more specifically about the southern resident community of orcas, this is an endangered population that we're very concerned about. They are also listed in Canada as a species at risk. There are only 75 orcas in this community. They do have 3 new calves, which was very exciting, but that also adds pressure in the population to find more fish. So what are the threats, research, and recovery that are facing the southern residents? Well, they're urban whales. We've talked about where they live and their range. So as far south as San Francisco and as far north as Southeast Alaska, but they also hit population centers like Victoria, Vancouver, Bellingham, Seattle. This is a very urban area with a lot of shipping on a lot of levels. So from recreational to commercial traffic. So increased noise. Noise is a problem for both the residents and transients, that in the presence of noise, they're having to raise their voices and extend their calls to be able to heard. And they need quieter waters to be able to communicate with one another, forage, as well as map their underwater environment. And transients, of course, hunting. So there's a lot of plastics, toxins, and persistent pollutants in the water, and that's going to build up in their system. This is the top of the food chain. So they have this bioaccumulation pressure of, as they take in food, that's also taken in toxins, and it's going to build up in their system. We can talk more about that later, but it's a big problem for them. These fats are lipophilic, meaning they attach to fats. Males have no ways to offload those, and females offload them through lactation to their young. So there are recovery plans in both the United States and Canada help these the residents recover, as well as the northern residents for the Canadian plan to increase salmon, clean up the toxins and pollution, protect the whales from vessels, and that's the sound, presence, and emissions, and prevent oil spills, and then doing things like we're doing today, which is educating the public. We believe that the more you know, the more you care, and hope that you will all join us to be stewards for these amazing animals. There is a website, bewhalewise.org, if you're interested in getting out and seeing whales. There's lots of ways to do that, from shore-based to boat-based, but we ask everybody to know the guidelines as well as the federal regulations on both sides of the border. There are regulations and sanctuary zones in Canada to help protect the whales and give them the space that they need. It's a good reminder that whenever we go out to recreate, we're playing in their living room. So we can make some choices to make that a more positive interaction for all of us, and especially the whales. There are 2 programs that are sister programs, Straight Watch in Canada and Sound Watch in Washington State waters. Both of these are on the water boater education programs that are providing stewardship efforts and mitigation for whales, as well as monitoring vessels to help inform critical habitat, as well as regulations and guidelines for operating vessels around whales. And that would be motorized and non-motorized vessels. How can you help? I'm not sure if we have any younger folks, but all of us are kids at heart. So simple things like what's printed here, from recycling to shoreline cleanups, stream cleanups, planting grasses, beach cleanups, turning off water, not using electricity as much, telling others what you've learned. You can do those in little ways and in big ways, but every action we take to improve the ecosystem is going to benefit the whales. We do have a Name the Baby contest going on right now. L125 is the 125th member recognized in LPOD and needs a name. We started this process back in the 90s when there was another capture planned of LPOD. The Whale Museum started this process, and it was planned, and we thought they thought back at the time that if we gave the whales names, that maybe people would connect to them better than to an alphanumeric, and it worked, and the capture was stopped, and there hasn't been another one since, not in the United States or in Canada, and we're very grateful for that. So the Whale Museum has gone on to give these more common names to whales, so we have the opportunity to do that naming, and we ask the public to help us by voting through our website. So that's whalemuseum.org, and you can vote for one of the 4 names there at the bottom, and we will announce that name first part of July.
Jenny, can you read out those 4 names? I found it just a little fuzzy on my screen and I can't quite make them out. What are those names?
Yeah, so the links will also take you directly to an email. It's Confetti, Current, Element, or Eureka, and that's to honor the mom's name. Her line is, she's Surprise. So we were asked our orca adopters to help us come up with some names that would honor that.
Love it.
So when the border reopens, some of you may already be on the United States side of the border, but the Whale Museum is open and eager to see you. So please come see us. There's lots of ways to get more involved. There's other research that we're doing through the Stranding Network. The Whale Hotline is a sightings hotline. And we're interested in all marine mammal sightings in the Salish Sea. So you can drop us an email at hotline@whalemuseum.org and tell us when, where, and what you saw. The On the Water Boater Education Program that we run is Soundwatch. We also are the coordinator for Be Whale Wise. You can listen live at csound.org, but we also take naturalist docents and program leaders. We offer a marine naturalist training program, which leads you into a naturalist association where you can do more public engagement, whether one-on-one or in larger groups, and you can email me for any information. If you have the ability to support our work through a donation, we would be very grateful for that, and that's also through our site. But mostly, I really thank you for caring about the whales, caring about the Royal BC Museum and the work that they're doing. It's an awesome institution, and I'm proud to be partnered with them. But I thank you so much for your time today.
I thank you, Jenny. We'll get you to stop sharing your screen so we can see you again. Thank you for such a clear presentation. I have been thinking about orcas and reading about orcas since probably late 2018, getting ready for our exhibit. And you've clarified a few things that were still fuzzy in my brain. So thank you so much, particularly the identification practice that's going on. And there's some questions here in our chat. When we started, I said, I often, before we got started officially, I said, I often picture on the other side of the screen adults, but we have a grade 3-4 class watching right now. So welcome grade 3-4 from West Kelowna.
Welcome. Can I just make a quick point when you said that about identification? What's really cool, and our storyteller shares this, is wherever black meets white, light meets dark on a whale, it is unique to that animal. Their eye patches are different. Some of them have freckles and beauty marks on their bellies. So if you really start looking at a whale, everywhere those 2 colors or shadings interact, it's unique to that animal.
Well, this relates to their very first question about why are killer whales black and white?
So that's a great question. We think it has to do with counter shading. So if you think about it, if you're an animal looking up, you're going to see light, which would be the sky. And if you're one looking down, you're going to see dark, which is the ground. But it also just looks super cool.
So it helps a bit with camouflaging perhaps in the water as well. And another question from the students are, do killer whales kill people? We call them killer whales. Have they ever been known to kill people in the wild?
Yeah, they have not ever been known to harm or kill a person in the wild. And then we believe that they got that name first was that when whalers, mariners out on the ocean would see them, they would see them killing other whales. So if you think about transients eating marine mammals, they will go after other whale species. So I think it probably started as killer of whales and then was shortened over time, but they have never been known to harm or attack a human in the wild.
Mm-hmm. That was, I think, one of the big revelations in our exhibition on orcas. It talks about capture of Moby Doll. Was a Southern resident who was captured and taken into Vancouver Harbour. And before that, people were terrified. They thought the whales were going to kill and attack them. And they were able to feed this giant animal by hand. And it really was the beginning of starting to understand more about their personalities and cultures. Another question from this class is, how do whales' tails help them? What is the purpose of a tail? What does it allow them to do?
So it depends. I mean, so it's kind of like any of our appendages. You can use them for a lot of different things, but we see them doing things like stunning their prey. That smacking can also be an acoustic signal to another member, might help them in like direction shifts, but it's a very active appendage. And they, you know, I didn't mention this before, but they also hunt and forage for fish cooperatively. So that has something to do with that group cohesion, that 4 or 5 transients might get together and cooperatively hunt something. Residents, same thing, they're herding fish. There are different strategies around the planet on how the whales eat, but they'll develop this foraging or hunting strategy, and then they do it together. They do everything together. They share their food. They're not going to just grab one critter and go off and eat it by themselves, but they're going to swim around and let other members in their community also get a bite.
And is that the main reason they swim in pods, is for hunting, or are there other reasons that they swim in pods?
So that I do believe that's part of it, but we, you know, residents are different. They're matrilineal. That's when in the winter time, when you don't have the big run going to the Fraser River, we'll see them break up into smaller groups for more successful foraging. But it has to do with group dynamics. You have to think about breeding possibilities. Traveling in a larger pod with other family groups would spread out your ability for reproductive success. But so, yeah, group cohesion, communication with one another, staying in touch, family is really important to residents. I saw one pop in, whales don't have gills because they are not fish.
Yeah, they're mammals with lungs like us, so they have to breathe. And Jenny, do they choose when to breathe? Like, and if so, how do you sleep?
So whales are mammals. They can breed and have babies, calves any time of year. It's about a 17-month gestation period. And then it's about 3 to 5 years for raising that young before mom's going to try to have another one. So it's a very long process. It's not a fast process, but they can have their calves any time of year. Southern residents tend to have more over the winter months because they have those big congregations in the summer. That's changing some now that they're traveling a little more differently. It's different than baleen whales. They're going to migrate. So they're going to have their whales and their babies in one part of this end of their range, and they're going to feed in another part, and they don't do them in the same place. So killer whales are not migrating. They're foraging. They're wandering around looking for food, and they can do anything in their life cycle at any point in their time, their range. And then you had a second part to that question.
Oh, so you answered an interesting question about breeding. I was asking about choosing to breathe. And if they're making the choice to breathe, how do they sleep?
Yep, so they are voluntary breathers. In a sense, they have to remind themselves to breathe. So even though they can dive very deeply, they have to come to the surface to take a breath. And they have 2 halves to their brain, and they're going to rest half the brain at a time. So one half is staying alert or awake to control function, and the other half is resting. When they go into deep rest, you'll see a large group of killer whales together in the southern resident community, at least, and they seem to be in physical contact with other members, and 1 or 2 might stay awake to kind of act as sentry, and then they just slowly roll at the surface, just as they're taking these very shallow dives and coming to the surface to breathe, and that's their rest. We don't see that as often anymore. There is a study going on this summer to see if they're getting deep rest over the night time when there's less boat traffic. So we hope to know more about that at the end of the summer. But it's a fascinating study being done by NOAA and Department of Fisheries and Oceans using a suction cup tag known as a D tag that they attach, and it has all kinds of things that it measures, from the received level of noise as well as depth of dives, etc. And we're hoping to get some information from that, because it'll be concerning if they're not getting that deep rest anymore.
Absolutely. Well, we have time for one more question. And from the class, they're asking, what is the biggest prey that orcas eat and which orcas eat that prey?
So transient orcas are going to be your biggest prey eaters, and they have been seen going after adult whales like gray whales and humpbacks. They
Wow.
may not be successful, but there was actually organized hunt on a gray whale in the inland waters a couple of years ago. More often, they'll go after the baby, but they have been seen going after whales much larger than them. More often in this area, it'd be a stellar sea lion would be the largest thing that you would regularly see them try to take, and that's still a very large animal. And I would invite your school group that once we are fully reopened to take a field trip. If they are in Victoria, it's only a 1 hour ferry ride from Sydney, and come see us. But if you are you're in Kelowna, if I remember right?
That's right. Yeah.
That
Go
Kelowna. So
Kamloops.
that's Yep, so they're gonna probably a 2 night trip. You guys could come down, but you could also hop on the ferry and go over and see the Royal BC. But we need the border to reopen first. Yeah,
Absolutely. Do you do virtual programs, Jenny? Is it
we do.
possible for people that,
Yep,
yeah, so that's
absolutely.
another way to
Yep,
possibly be here too.
absolutely. We'll
Oh,
do
great.
virtual. It's not quite the same, that it smells better than being around a bunch of old bones, but yeah, we'd love to. And that information's on our website at whalemuseum.org.
Well, I hope people will check that out. Jenny,
Yeah,
we could probably answer questions, as you're saying, for a much longer time, but we are going to start to bring this to a close.
thank
And
you.
I want to thank everyone who joined us. If you joined late or you missed something, or you just want to watch it or share this with somebody, it has been recorded and you will find it on the Royal BC Museum's YouTube channel. So please have a look there. Our museum has reopened and our new feature exhibition, Orcas, Our Shared Future, is on now. And again, if you live locally, we encourage you to find out more about time tickets on our website. And if you don't live locally, we too are doing virtual tours of the space, and we have a new video coming out soon that you'll be able to purchase and watch anytime. Our next RBCM at Home will be on June the 8th, and our guest will be Surfrider Foundation, Vancouver Island, and they're going to talk to us about plastic pollution and how to get involved with beach cleanups using a new app. Because we want to protect the orcas habitat, but you know, the oceans are also so important for us. So what we do to help them helps us as well. So until then, please take care of yourselves and one another. Bye-bye. So